So the next speaker is by far the best ex-Muslim dancer in the community. He we were actually talking about we were actually talking at an ex-Muslim event in the sort of secret communities that exist, and we were like all sort of surrounding him, and he was telling us stories about his family that just cracked us up. So I was like, "Do you want to speak here?" And he was like, "Oh yeah, sure." He's also very excited about this event because, and I quote, "Oh my God, please take pictures of me. It'll be the first photo I have that doesn't look like it's been taken by a potato." So I'd like to introduce Ahmed on stage. Please put your hands together for Ahmed.
Hello, thank you very much. Before I start, may I just give a bit of disclaimer. I'm going to freestyle everything today. I feel there is no point for notes. I mean, if ever there was a guarantee that I'd do something well, it'd be something wholly relying on my own experience. So if I make any mistakes, meh. And also, before I proceed, I'd like to thank Aliyah and Imtiaz because back in my religious days, I was, as you probably know, I was ex-Muslim and ex-Christian. Back in the ex-Christian days, I used to pray a lot, and one of the prayers I did was to come to UCL. However, that didn't really happen. And according to the Bible, what you bind on earth, you shall also be bound in heaven. And you believe I bound that on earth, and it didn't happen. So I'd like to thank Imtiaz and Aliyah for actually answering prayers. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you need your first prophet, my name is conveniently a diminutive of Islam's greatest one, just saying. Yeah, sorry. So my experience of Islam was, I left Islam when I was 8, and it was actually an accident because my mother, when she came over here, fell into the wrong crowd, according to my family. She fell into the Christian crowd as a Muslim, and that is the worst thing you can do because we were painting lamb's blood on the wall back in Nigeria, hoping that she'd come back, but she didn't. So she did a better job of taking us to churches than my father did of taking us to the mosque. I'll get to my father later. In this Christian vein, we were the strain Pentecostal, which in my experience is probably one of the most extreme because it's wholly based on charisma, and there were a lot of charismatic people there. They can get you to believe virtually anything. You don't have to question much. You just believe. But the biggest paradox in my experience was when one preacher came. We used to hold something called a gathering of champions. And one of the preachers came and said, "Oh, preacher, I woke up yesterday, a dream from God, and he said you should build this." And then another preacher came and said, "I also had a dream, and he said you shouldn't build this." And we were like, "So isn't this the same God? What is going on here?" And that just caused me to begin. That was the beginning of my doubt. I think I was 9 years old then. That was the beginning of my doubt. But then my mother she's African. And all I can say is, being African, you're predisposed to wanting your children to be doctors, lawyers, and accountants. And she pushed me off to law school with no idea of the consequences that could possibly have. I came in touch with philosophy and even theology, I guess, to a degree, legal reasoning and things like this. And I came home and I said, "Oh, Mom, look what I learned today. You know, as a consequence of this legal philosophy, surely the Bible must not be wholly true." And she was like, "What?" And I was like, "Oh, nothing." So I waited. I waited to grow up a little more, get a bit more muscle because I was wholly terrified. Get a little more muscle, something sustain a bit more damage. And I said, "Oh, mother, remember that conversation we had 5 years ago?" I came against another legal principle, and this one is really compelling. It posits that we have to use material things to understand the world and things like this. And she was like, "What?" Again, and I was a bit more. I had more conviction, so I said, "No, look, my teacher said." And she was like, "Okay." So, but she brushed me aside. But I began, even though she brushed me aside, I began to read books myself, things I didn't do things I didn't do when I was religious, if I'm honest. I didn't like to read. I don't even think I knew how to read. Like to read words and take them into my brain. Right now my dictionary is my best friend. I read, my sister can attest, I read the dictionary everywhere I go, even in the toilet, I'm sorry to admit. Because I find words are what human beings have. We made these things ourselves. And as a consequence of what we made, either we lead ourselves astray or we lead ourselves to salvation. There's no reliance on a God that I did before. Back in the day when I was religious, it was a convenient reason, It was a convenient reason why I didn't really study too hard. Oh, sorry. A convenient
keep away from the mic.
Keep away from the mic. Sorry.
Might be easier.
All right.
It's real distortion.
Oh,
Try again.
sorry. That's a lot of words. A convenient reason. Everyone hear me right? Okay. Thank you. A convenient reason why I didn't really apply myself to education was because I believed God already had everything predestined. You know, if I was to have an A, I'd get an A, and if I was to get a C, E, U, I'd get a C, E, U. And when I got a U, I was like, oh man, God must think. But when I really thought about it in hindsight, I didn't do crap. You know, I couldn't get, one of the reasons why I didn't get into UCL and King's is because the conditions, I didn't meet them because they asked me for A's in my last modules, and just, you know, praising God and stuff, I didn't get those conditions. I was too busy in church and stuff like this. I'm trying to bring other people to the light, as they say. Anyway, that's how that went. So yeah, my father, you think I'm interesting, being ex-Muslim and ex-Christian. My father is actually more interested than I am because he has been ex-Muslim, ex-Christian like infinite times. My grandmother is the biggest matriarch of religion in our family, and whenever she's on the shores of this country, my father becomes instantaneously religious. However, my mother also, being my grandma's daughter, is the religiosity rubbed off on her also, so she can be a big matriarch also. But you get one matriarch of Christianity and one matriarch of Islam, and that puts my father in a very uncomfortable position because when he wishes to be to seek affection from a mum, he'll be Christian. Right now, he's actually Christian. But when my grandma comes to the house, then he becomes Islamic again. I actually bought a telescope, or maybe I'm exaggerating. I look forward to my father's change of religion, like astronomers look forward to the eclipse, because something magical happens. All of a sudden, he stops to what's that word? Sorry. He stops. He forgets everything he learned in the Quran, or that my mum's indoctrinated him with in the Bible, and all of a sudden he knows the Quran and things like this, and the same works with when he becomes Christian. But there's a more sinister element to this, because that I found is people, if you're not careful, I think my exercise of religion was pure in that I even became extremist. I came up against a theory of metaphorical understanding of this character Jesus Christ and a literal understanding, and I chose to believe in the literal understanding because I thought, what is the purpose of following somebody who wasn't more than a man? If his miracles, turning this to that and turning that to this, was just a metaphor to teach us something, what is the purpose of following him? Surely that's the same as me. I could make a metaphor of myself. This is something that I think gradually led me out of religion, because I tried the New Age thing. I've been around the block, in honesty. I just thought that the page that Imtiaz had could only sustain ex-Muslim, ex-Christian, because I've been many exes, if I'm honest. Yeah, so I thought, what did I think? Sorry, I thought it was just best to leave religion altogether. Now, I don't know what is up there, in honesty. I don't, but I think that my time could be better spent trying to just help human beings, which is something I think I wanted to do, but I was taught that morality came from God, and if you ever had any altruistic bone in your body or humanitarian bone in your body, then it must be from the pool of God, and therefore you should try to do so with God by your side. But my many experiences with God have proven that he does this, he does that in the Bible. He kills, he steals. And I remember I was sleeping one time and I woke up and a thought came to me. I thought, essentially it boils down to this. if I have a friend whose pastimes are killing, sacking countries, sacking other nations and things like this, I would choose to not be, let's call him Imtiaz, I would choose to not be Imtiaz's friend. So should this change because this person happens to be ordained or the maker of heavens? I don't think so. Now, I have very strong questions. If there happens to be a God, I should die one day and there happens to be a God, I have a lot of questions for him. Why, for instance, do you make a parasite cause the lower worms that like to bury in people's eyeballs and eat their tissue, causing blindness? Why do you make children who are born, 5 minutes later they die? What is the purpose of this? There's something much more sinister to this feeling of God. I don't quite understand where it comes from. Hopefully our psychological friends can help us. But I just feel it does more damage than good. Now, I've never come across anybody who can give me a compelling argument as to why religion is great for me. But I know many experiences of why I must choose to not be a member of religion. And as long as, I'm sorry to say, as long as my parents and my family, my immediate family are the guardians of religion, any type, I fear to, no, I don't need to fear, sorry. I must say that state will not change. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ahmed. Just like to say for anyone watching from the services, I have never sacked a country or killed anyone. What I want you guys to do as well while people are speaking is think about the threads and the common elements and also think about the differences, because the whole point of this is that they are different, they're very different ways of approaching this. Sometimes they're theological, sometimes they're philosophical, sometimes it's very personal and familial.